When my grandmother was in her 80s, my mom and her siblings decided that it was time that grandma shouldn't live on her own anymore, that she should come and live with them. It was really good that they had that option, but in my mother's case, she was still working, and so she didn't want my grandmother to be alone during the day. So when my grandmother came to live with my mother, one of the first things they did was interview a caregiver so that there would be a companion with my grandmother during the day while my mom worked, and somebody just, there to help her out if she needed anything, to be sure that she was eating correctly because my grandmother was in the early stages of dementia. So the big question is, how do you go about hiring a caregiver? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Robin with SeniorSafetyAdvice.com. And as I said in the opening, we're going to talk about all of the interview questions and the things that you should look for in hiring a caregiver if you have to do this on a personal basis. Now, for me, when my mother was in the last couple months of her life, she was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor, and she needed some help to come in every day to help her with certain activities of daily living, or ADLs, that my father just was kind of unable to handle at that point. She was in her late 80s and he was in his early 90s, and to help her with things like wheelchair transfers or getting in and out of the shower, it just was not something he was able to do. So in our case, we went through an agency, and the agency basically took care of the interviewing for us because they go ahead and check out all of the all of the caregivers that they hire. So you know that they work well with other people, that they have experience, that they have been through training, that kind of thing. Although I do want to caution, not all companies that hire caregivers require them to go through a training. So you do actually want to check that out from an agency if you decide to go with an agency. Do ask them what kind of training the person has, and are they new to that agency, or does the agency have references, things like that. But in the case of my grandmother, my parents hired somebody who was a personal caregiver. She was just on her own. She was not associated with an agency. So that's where you need to really find answers to questions like certification. So in most states, caregivers are not required to have any certification. Now, that being said, many states still have a training program or various training programs that a person who wants to be a caregiver can go through. A lot of times you would find those in a community college setting, and usually there's somewhere around 75 to 120 hours of training. It would cover various things: how to help somebody in and out of a wheelchair, how to take blood pressure, basically, the very, very minimal, more like a CNA or a certified nurse's assistant, those type of skills. But again, somebody can just decide that they want to be a caregiver. Maybe they've had experience taking care of their own loved ones in their family, and they decide that they're going to go ahead and do this as a matter of employment. Okay, so if you're going to have a caregiver interview with somebody, when they come over, what kind of questions should you ask? How are you going to hire this caregiver? Well, one of the first things that you want to know, as I said before, are, do they have any training? This is particularly important if you have a family member that's going to be taken care of. Let's say they have Parkinson's or they have dementia. Does this person that you're looking at hiring have any experience in dealing with a person like that? It can be very challenging to try and deal with a dementia patient who is combative. So one of the questions you could ask is, like a job interview, I hate these questions, but tell me a time. So you could say something like, tell me a time when you took care of somebody like my father who has Parkinson's. What were some of the challenges you had to deal with? How did you solve those challenges? It'll give you an idea of what kind of experience they have. Another thing that you want to do is, obviously, you want to get references. You need to find out name and contact information for people that this person is saying that they have given care for in the past. You know, just because they're sitting here saying they're a caregiver doesn't necessarily mean they are. So you're definitely going to want to get references to find out how they gave care. Were they experienced? Were they capable? Were they patient with the person? Those kinds of things. Something else that you may want to consider is if they speak the same language as the person they're going to care for. For example, somebody may say that they are fluent in Spanish, but really they are not. And if it comes down to a situation where the person they're taking care of only speaks Spanish, will they be able to help that person? Conversely, I've heard of cases where my own grandmother was kind of like this on my father's side. Her family was from Germany. They spoke German when she first came to the States. She spoke fine English for, the whole 90 plus years after she was here. But when she was in her final year, she also had a little bit of dementia. And it turned out that in many cases, she reverted to her childhood German. If the person who's taking care of your loved one isn't able to converse in that language, there may be an issue at some point, especially if there's more of a emergency panic situation and that person gets stressed and reverts to a language that they used in childhood. You want to be sure that everybody's speaking the same language. So going back to the training issue, again, some people have not been through any type of training, so that may be a critical factor for you depending on what your loved one's needs are. For me, as a dental hygienist, I feel like anybody who is going to take care of anybody actually, but for sure a senior loved one, they need to have CPR training. So that is something I would tell you that you need to make sure that you look for. If something happens to your loved one, is this person going to know what to do in order to help them until the first responders get there? So definitely, I would say look for CPR training. So next on the list are skills. What kind of skills does this person have? Again, if you're dealing with someone like my mother who had a brain tumor, she was in a wheelchair. She could not move. She couldn't get herself in and out of the wheelchair. So I would want to know, does this person have skills in helping somebody in and out of a wheelchair? Have they got the physical strength to help somebody in and out of a wheelchair? For a Parkinson's patient, you would want to know that they understand how to help somebody if they fall. Can they get them up off the floor? A person who is diabetic, does this person who is a potential caregiver understand diabetes? Do they know enough about the disease? Do they understand about medications and the need to take the blood sugar readings? Is there insulin that needs to be given? In that case, you're going to really want to have more of a nurse, a skilled person who is coming in and administering medications, because somebody who comes through an agency or is just a person who does caregiving as a job but isn't actually a nurse, they are not qualified and they're not licensed, they should not be dispensing medications. Now, it's one thing if you have the medications all set up. That's what we did with my mother. She was on various meds and we had them set up in a pill box. So, one of those with the day of the week and the time of the day. A person who is not licensed should still be able to take the morning pills out and hand them to somebody, but you don't want them to be responsible for taking, the medication out of the medication bottle. Are they giving them the correct amount or whatever? No, don't do that. That is a skilled person with a license. Another skill that you want to be sure is if your loved one has any equipment that's needed, does the potential caregiver know how to operate that equipment? If the person is on an oxygen machine of some type, will the caregiver be able to change out the oxygen tanks? If there is a nebulizer for breathing involved, do they know how something like that works? If your loved one has a problem with blood pressure and needs to have their readings taken, can the caregiver operate a blood pressure cuff? Do they understand what the readings should be? When they maybe would need to call 911 if there was an issue with blood pressure. Then they would also need to be aware of how to help somebody physically do the ADLs. Can they help them shower? Can they help them change? How about brushing their teeth? Again, dental hygienist, I can tell you it's not real easy to floss somebody else's teeth and brush them. So, you want to just be sure that the person that you're hiring is capable of doing these tasks. Okay, so interview questions. Again, if you're going through an agency, the majority of these questions are already going to be answered. One of the things, though, with an agency as well as an on-your-own interview is a personality type of not a test, but you want to be sure that their personality is going to get along with the personality of your loved one. So you might ask things like, do you have any hobbies? What do you like to do in your spare time? Things like that can give you an answer whether maybe there would be something in common between them and your loved one. Another question you could ask, you want to be sure that this person is going to be compassionate and patient with your loved one, but you can't just come out and say that. Are you compassionate? Because of course they're going to say, yes, I am. So a question would be, what made you become a caregiver? Tell me something. Tell me some of your favorite caregiver stories. Was there a time that you had a challenge as a caregiver, and what did you do to address that challenge? Again, these questions can help you determine whether this person is going to be the right fit for your loved one. Big question again, are you certified? If they are certified, if they say they are, you want to be sure that you get the information for the program that they were certified through. Also the information, contact information for the school that they were certified through. That's going to come into handy later when we get down to the end about things that you're going to do after the interview. Another thing to ask is, are they licensed and are they bonded? Again, if they're licensed and bonded, you're going to want contact information for that. So again, like a job interview, you can ask several what-if questions. I'm trying to think. My mother fell out of the wheelchair when she was in it, and not when the caregiver was there, just when my poor father was there alone and he panicked and didn't know what to do. He called 911, which he should have done, and they came out and helped her back up into the wheelchair. But you can ask a situational question like that. What if someone fell out of the chair, what would you do? What if my father who has Parkinson's fell, what would you do? You can also ask direct questions such as, what experience do you have with somebody who is in a wheelchair? What experience have you had taking care of a patient with a brain tumor? What experience have you had taking care of someone who's in the end stages of cancer? Things like that. Again, it's just going to give you an overall feel as to whether this is a good person for the job. Okay, so you've successfully made it through the interview. You've taken notes on everything. Now, what do? If you're not so interested in the person, politely thank them for coming. Tell them that you're going to have other interviews and you will let them know. But what if you are interested in this person and you do think you want to hire them? The first thing that you need to do is tell them that you are interested and you would like to run a background check. You need to have their permission for this because you're going to need to have several pieces of information in order to do that. So assuming that they agree to that and that you like them, whatever, you're going to need their full name. So not just Mary Smith, but Mary Jennifer Smith, or whatever names they have been working under. You're going to want their full street address. You're going to need their social security number, and you're also going to need their phone number. The other thing that you should also do is get a picture ID, so, driver's license, military ID, whatever that they have that has their photo on it, and take a picture of that with your phone. That way you've got it in your phone for reference, so you, again, should have their full name and their address at least on that. And if you need that driver's license number or whatever for the credit check, you have it as well. Okay, so now you have all of their pertinent information. So the next step is you have to go through the contacts with everything. So you want to run the background check. You want to call the school. I know somebody who swore up and down that they had a degree in a certain field from a particular school, and yet nobody could ever find this degree. So when ultimately someone else called the actual school to find out if this particular person had graduated, turns out no, they'd attended the school, but they were never in that degree program. They'd never graduated. So my point is, just because somebody says they went to XYZ school and they learned how to do caregiving does not mean that they did. So you definitely want to check the school. You want to be sure it exists. You want to be sure it has a program. And you want to be sure that program was in effect during the years that the potential caregiver says that they attended. And if at all possible, you want to get an actual confirmation that the person did attend the program and did complete the program successfully. Also, if this potential caregiver says that they are licensed and bonded, they should be able to provide you with a license number and with the bonding insurance company. So you'll want to check into those as well. And last but not least, make sure you're running a credit check and a background check on that person before you hire them, just to be sure that there isn't something unforeseen in their background.